Our paths have crossed and uncrossed and crossed again, and that makes me really happy because she's turning out to be a lifelong friend. Reverend Peggy has worked many professions in her lifetime, I think all serving people in one way or another. I'm so happy that she's become a friend of Center of Enlightenment and kind of a regular person around here because we really love you and appreciate you and enjoy whatever wisdom and truth you bring to us. So let's welcome Reverend Peggy Konkel to the podium.
Thank you. And yes, you folks have become a part of my heart as well, so I feel blessed when I come here. So it looks like good, grand, glorious morning. That's what it looks like.
The sun's starting to come out, looks like.
Start off there. So the title of my story this morning is A Big Fish Story, and I dedicate this story to my 11-year-old grandson Liam, who caught a 4.5-pound catfish over Labor Day weekend.
Hey.
And he's not a big guy, he's a little guy, so there's this little guy with this big fish, so I dedicate this to him. So I want to talk a little bit about the idea of story before I get into the big fish story. And what has come on my particular radar over the last few weeks is the idea of there is the story and there is storyteller. So the person who listens to the story or reads the story gets the idea of the story, but they also get the second story, the idea of the storyteller's story, because the storyteller cannot objectively tell the story without adding in their own mood, their own emotions, their own feelings about what's going on in the story. So when I read stories in the Bible, I think not only of the idea of the story that's being told to me, but from the fact of who is telling the story. In some cases, I do not know. Sometimes it's just the oral story that is being handed down. And so in that case, it's gone through how many storytellers who have added their moods and their emotions and their interpretations to the story. So that also tells me that the idea that the story for the audience who's listening to the story or reading the story is their story, how they're interpreting the story. So how I interpret the story to you this morning, or how I interpret any story to you, gives you a slant of who I am. But the importance is how is it affecting you? What do the words mean to you? What do the emotions mean to you? What does the story mean to you? So as you may know, that the story I'm going to tell this morning is the story of Jonah and the big fish. So I will start off by reading the first part of the story that comes from the prophet Jonah, and Jonah was a prophet. And the idea of prophet is that part of us that comes within our consciousness, that is our conscience, which means that it's saying, look here, I'm here to warn you. You may want to go this way, or you may not want to go that way. So it starts off reading this way. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, saying, go at once to Nineveh, that greatest city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come before me. But Jonah set out to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. Tarshish was the opposite direction. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid his fare and went on board to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. Well, this is the beginning of the story. And of course, every story in the Bible is our story. And so what happens is if we look at the story as we hear within us is something that we know that we need to do, right? We are being called to do something. We have heard it within ourselves. We know it comes from our higher self. And how often we get into that place of thinking, oh, but I don't want to do that. For whatever reason. Generally, it's fear. Could be because you just don't want to put the work into it. But with Jonah, the idea was fear. He knew that Nineveh was doing wrong. He didn't want any parts of it. He didn't want to go there. He didn't want to get in the middle of it. It's like somebody who wants to preach to the Lord, and they're told to go downtown and preach to the folks that are in, let's say, if you were in New York City, in the Bowery. And you say, oh, I don't want to go down there. No way. I'm going the opposite direction. We hear within ourselves what we are being called to do. And sometimes it takes once, and sometimes it takes twice, and sometimes it takes 3 times. Nineveh represents, if we look at it metaphysically, it represents that exterior area of growth, of vigor, of agreeableness, of youth education, organization coming together, but it's all on that material plane. If we look at the metaphysics of the name Amittai, the father of Noah, it is truth, but it's truth in that intellectual setting. It's that truth that is that outer truth that calls for justice, it calls for punishment. You did that, therefore you need to pay, as opposed to that higher spiritual aspect of us which says, I have compassion, I have mercy. And that's what this story is all about. So we in our natural human place hang out most of our time in our natural human place because that's who we are. We're humans. We spend time certainly in meditation and spiritual study and trying to grow in our spiritual realm. But let's face it, we spend most of our time being human, doing human things, reacting to our human emotions. And so that's what Jonah was doing. No way, Jose, I'm not going there, don't want to get in the middle of it. So he gets on this boat and a storm comes up. And storms is what happens to us when we are in that place where we're saying, I hear you, God. No thanks, send somebody else. I'm not up to this. And we go about thinking, well, I'll just go my merry way, and I'll catch up with you later, God, on that one. And what happens is we get in this place where things come up that keep on us bringing us back to listening to what we should have been listening to all along. And so the storm comes up, and the sailors don't know what to do, and so they start throwing things overboard, and then they start praying to their own gods, and Noah goes downstairs in the hull of the ship and falls asleep. Well, when we look at this in our way, this is what happens. What we do is we fall asleep to it. Okay, I heard it, yeah. And we fall asleep to it. We don't put our responsibility into what we heard. We don't take the next step. We'll catch up with you later. But the sailors know that the boat is sinking, so they start to pray to their gods, and then the captain goes, hey, wait a minute, where's Noah?
You mean Jonah?
Jonah, sorry. Sorry, absolutely, I mean Jonah. And the captain says, you get up here and you pray to your God. And so it really doesn't say that Jonah prayed to his God. But the sailors cast lots to say, okay, who is responsible for this storm? And in casting the lots, it was Jonah who got the lot. And Jonah was honest in his own way. He says, yeah, I'm running from God. Please, just throw me overboard. Okay, I did a bad thing. Just throw me overboard. That's my punishment. And how often do we do that to ourselves when we realize that we veer off the path? We just want to be punished for it. If you got in an accident in a car, what would happen? Did you say, oh, it was an accident, this happened and that happened, we'll take care of fixing what we need to do, pay the damages, and get on with life? I don't know about you, but I sit there and mull that over in my mind. How could I do it differently? I punished myself. I shoulda, woulda, coulda punishment. And so they did. The sailors threw Jonah overboard. And in that place, when they threw Jonah overboard, they prayed to Jonah's God, not their God, please don't allow us to be affected for doing this. We don't want to do this. But this is how we see to save ourselves. And so Jonah went down, 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 down into the water and was finally swallowed up in the belly of the big fish. What a whale of a story. What a whale of a story. And this is what happens to us. Finally, when we're in that place where we realize that we're in the rock and the hard place, and we're dying here, we're just dying in this place that we're in, we sink to that lowest point. But we're always thrown some way to be saved. Always thrown some way to be saved. And so this big fish comes along and swallows up Jonah. And in that swallowing up, he spends 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of this fish. I watched Pinocchio the other night, and I saw Pinocchio and his father and whatever else was with them in this belly of this fish monster, and I was like, yeah, there's my talk. The idea is at 3 days and 3 nights. Now you hear this in other stories in the Bible too. And of course, it's in the Jesus story. 3 days and 3 nights. 3 days, and it's in Genesis, and day and night, and day and night. And what this represents to us is it's not all good and it's not all bad. There will be darkness and there will be brightness as we go through this time of growth and transformation. So this whole story is about the idea of growing out of our everyday material life and growing into our spiritual life. What happens is that finally even the fish gets tired of him and spits him up. Have you ever been in that place where you just sulk and you cry and you whine on your friends and, oh, I wish life was different, and finally they get tired of you and just spit you out. They don't listen to you anymore. They turn around and they go do other things. Well, he was spit out. And so then he listened to the word. So after he was spit out onto land, dry land, not into the water, onto dry land, put back where he had a foundation. And then this happens to us. So, well, if we can't die, we have to live. So we figure out how to do it. So the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time, saying, get up, go to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim to it the message I tell you. So Jonah set out and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly large city, a 3 days' walk across. Jonah began to go into the city going a day's walk, just 1/3 way. And he cried out. He didn't wait till he got to the middle of the city. I'm surprised he went the whole 1/3 way in. But then he cried out and he said, 40 days more, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. 40 days. Now we know this in metaphysical interpretation is the time it takes. 40 days is the time it takes. So it's as much time as it takes is to be thrown over. And the people of Nineveh believed God. Jonah wasn't so good about believing God. He ran the other direction. But the people of Nineveh like children, began to believe God, like the mature part of them. And they proclaimed a fast, and everyone, great and small, put on sackcloth. And the king made a commitment. He sent out a dictate to Nineveh that they would sit there and they would fast and they would wait, hoping that if they repented, that God would not do what God said, that they would not be punished or wiped off the earth or whatever. And they were not. So when God saw what they did, now they turned from their evil ways, God changed his mind about the calamity that he had said he would bring upon them and did not do it. Now, I don't know about you, but my God does not change its mind. My God is always there as pure, steadfast love. And the idea of punishment is we punish ourselves. It is we who change our mind towards God, the good. Now I want to read you this last part of what Jonah decides. But this was very displeasing to Jonah, and he became angry. He prayed to the Lord and said, "O Lord, this is not what I said while I was still in my own country. That is why I fled to Tarshish at the beginning, for I knew that you are a gracious God and a merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, and ready to relent from punishing. And now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live." See, Jonah was upset because he wanted Nineveh to be punished. In his outward thinking, he was not compassionate. It was like, they did wrong, you punish them, then I'll accept them. And that's not the way God works, because God's a loving God. We punish ourselves. And we punish other people within ourselves. For instance, I could say right now, there you go, we got a war over there in Europe, right? So part of us want to punish one side, part of us want to punish the other side, maybe part of us wants to punish all of it. But that's not God. That's not God's way. Sure, as children in the outer world, we will pick fights, we will have conflicts, we will have to come to resolution. So what does Jonah do when things don't go Jonah's way? What do we do? I don't know about you. I've been known to be a pouter. Go sit in my corner and cry. And that's what Jonah did. So he went and he sat outside of Nineveh and he pouted. And it was sunny and it was hot, and God sent a plant to go up and give him shade. And then he thought, oh, this is good. I've got shade. I can sit here and pout in comfort. And then what happened was the next day, God sent a little worm into that plant, and the plant withered, and the comfort went away. You see, and that's kind of the way it is when we pout too. You know, it's kind of that dirty diaper syndrome. You sit in it and you wallow it, and finally you realize you need to change your diaper. Yeah. But God said to Jonah, "Is it right for you to be angry about the bush?" And he said, "Yes, angry enough to die." Then the Lord said, "You are concerned about the bush for which you did not labor and which you did not grow. It came into being in a night and perished in a night. And should I not be concerned about Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left? And also many animals." I'm going, and also many animals? Because who takes care of the animals in the city?
The people.
The people. I love the stories in the Bibles, and the story of Jonah also reminds me of the story of Job. Job had everything, and then he lost everything. And what really happened in the end was that he had to have this conversation with God to realize that God is omnipotent and God is omniscient. And Job is just Job. And to be grateful for the fact that we have life to begin with. And not to just want to die when things don't go our way. So I think that this story is really about being honest with ourselves. I'm not talking about the kind of honesty like Jonah was talking about, well, be honest that you did wrong, or be honest that you admit that, it's probably you are the reason that the storm came up and that you have affected other people. But I see this as a story of self-honesty. A story where we look beyond, because we go through the day-to-day thinking that we are honest with ourselves and with other people. And if we do tell lies, if we do try to manipulate people, we can even say to ourselves, well, yeah, I really did that. I really want this to go this way, so I'm going to try to manipulate it a little way, try to control it a little way, so it will go my way. Well, I'm talking about that deeper honesty within ourselves that we awaken to as we grow spiritually. I'm talking about that honesty that says that I am more than this human being having this human experience. I am a spiritual being. There's something more going on here in me. I am here to serve a purpose and a greater purpose. And I may never know what the words that I say or the acts I do to create a better life for somebody else. But what I do know, that honesty, is that when I hear that little nudge within myself that says, you really ought to be doing this and not that, to listen to that nudge and to be with the feelings that say, but I don't wanna, and to know that I don't do it by myself. It is not I, but the Christ within me, that God essence within me that gives me all the power that I ever knew. So how do I get to that place? Through honesty and openness, that openness to be open with myself as well as others. In the 12-step programs, there is a 5th step that goes to admit to God, myself, and others. So the way that reads to me is when I admit to God, it's like, okay, I'm seeing that there's some spiritual context going on here. And when I admit to myself, I'm getting in that deeper place of realizing that what I do have control over is my thoughts and how I react, whether I come from that higher self of me, that spiritual self, or that lesser self of me, that personality self. And when I admit to others, what I'm doing is being real, being authentic, being vulnerable, taking a risk to stand for who I am, being authentic, being in my integrity, being whole. And the willingness is the responsibility to change who I have been, to break out of the habits and take the effort to move into the courage, knowing that the courage comes from God, the strength comes from God. All I have to do is ask and act. Ask and act. Take that first step. And I get the push behind me that moves me into the place I need to be. So all I need is to be willing for that change and growth to occur, and the transformation will come. So a story is just a story. And are you ready to move through your story to be true to the truth of who you are? God bless you.